We've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to start at the top with Dinesh D'Souza. I think most of my listeners are familiar with him. He had a prominent career as a writer, scholar, and public intellectual. He's also become an award-winning filmmaker, and we will preview his new film coming out, Police State. That's coming out at the end of October. We're going to talk about that, too. But I really wanted Dinesh on for a couple reasons. I mean, he prominently did the 2000 Mules movie, which is now coming full circle. You know, we're talking 2 years after that came out. Maybe it's been 1 year since it's been out. But regardless, now we are going to be able to maybe find out exactly what happened in Georgia because Trump's been indicted there for none other than interfering in the Georgia election himself. I don't really buy that. But Dinesh, are you on the line with me?
I am. How are you?
Very good. And by the way, I just wanted to put a little plug in here. Dinesh will be in Effingham, Illinois on September 29th, hosting. He's going to be the keynote speaker at a fundraiser for the Illinois Freedom Caucus. So if you want to get tickets, you can go to the Illinois Freedom Caucus website and you can purchase them there. I will be going there. I'm hoping it's a sold out crowd because I have heard you speak before and you just want more. You can speak for a half hour and the audience still wants more because you're so knowledgeable about this stuff. But back to the primary question here, Dinesh. Do you think that there will be actual proof coming out during Trump's trial in Georgia about election fraud, voter issues?
Well, let's say I hope so. It's going to be up to the Trump team to figure out what is their best strategy to take on these allegations. So the allegations are that they organized a conspiracy, a RICO kind of organized crime style conspiracy with lots of people playing their part to try to illicitly overturn the election result in Georgia and in the country generally. But of course, the presumption then is that the Georgia result was kosher, was legitimate, was fair, and that somehow Trump not only suspected it was unfair, but he knew that it was fair and still went ahead. So this is a very heavy burden that they have to make the case against Trump. So Trump can go one of two ways. He can say, look, this is not really about whether or not the Georgia election was fair or not, but the idea that I somehow knew it was unfair and knew that it was fair and nevertheless was pursuing this conspiracy is absurd. Or he can say, guess what? We're going to put the Georgia election itself on trial, and we're going to expose fraud, and we're going to show that I had good reason to believe that the election was stolen, not just in Georgia, but elsewhere. And this is actually where 2000 Mules might be relevant and very helpful to the Trump team, because in my view, it provides the most kind of reliable and systematic evidence of fraud. It goes beyond so-called anomalies or strange things like unexplained developments and so on. It shows the actual fraud being carried out in various ways. So,
I mean, obviously there's been a lot of criticism of 2000 Mules. Even the Wall Street Journal just in July wrote an editorial saying 2000 Mules, but no evidence. True the Vote stiff arms law enforcement as it faces a defamation case. And so there's a lot of folks that have doubt, but you interacted so directly with the data at that time. I mean, you're not one to just, take on a huge movie project on something that you don't believe is true.
Right. I mean, it's important to notice what's going on and what is being disputed and on what basis. The defamation case involves one guy who is shown in the film depositing several ballots. And he wasn't identified or named in the movie, but he sort of identifies himself, and he goes, I'm not a mule. I was depositing the ballots of all my various family members. So he's claiming that in his case, that particular guy is not a mule. He's not saying that there weren't mules. He's not saying that there was an election fraud. He's simply saying that in his case, there is a plausible explanation. Now, the point of the movie, of course, was to show you all this official surveillance footage taken by the states themselves. This is not my footage. It's taken by Georgia. It's taken by other states. And so it's part of an official record. And you can just watch the movie and you see all kinds of stuff that raises major suspicions. You have people with satchels of ballots, depositing ballots and going on to the next drop box and so on. Now, it's true that some of the fact checkers have developed a kind of selective skepticism about geo-tracking where they say, with a straight face, oh, we can't trust the technology. We don't really know if it works all that well. It's only kind of approximate and so on. But you've got to remember that this is the exact same technology that is relied on in murder cases. It's relied on to pinpoint January 6th protesters inside and around the Capitol. So in every other situation, this exact same technology is treated by law enforcement as 100% legitimate. So it's very odd that in this one case of voter fraud, the technology suddenly, becomes dubious. So the criticisms of 2,000 Mules in that sense, I think, have really not impressed me at all. And I think all the Wall Street Journal was saying is that the next step, which would be for law enforcement to go interview the mules, find out who they are, find out what they were doing, where did they get the ballots? I mean, could there be a plausible explanation for all this? Maybe, but unfortunately the movie stopped there. It wasn't able to take the next step, which is a step, of course, that is not our job, but the job of law enforcement.
Yeah, well, you're right. And we had Cleta Mitchell on the program, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And she essentially said, listen, we had court cases teed up about the election fraud and the improprieties. None of them were heard. They didn't hear them. Nobody's seen the evidence. So that's why I think it's really important that, and also I think it's kind of interesting that Georgia was the primary focus of 2,000 Mules. And now here we have Georgia having one of the largest, I think, court cases in the history of the United States before an election coming up. And so maybe we'll find out the truth.
Yeah, the problem, I think, with our society right now is that these claims and counterclaims are rarely debated. So, for example, it would be easy for CNN to have had me on with 2,000 Mules, and or MSNBC, and then I can sort of have it out with Rachel Maddow, and she can make all the obvious points that we hear from the left, like, well, there were 51 cases and they were all dismissed, and then I make the point that, well, in not a single one of those cases were the merits of the claims addressed in a sort of investigative way. Let's find out what happened in Wisconsin. Let's find out what happened in Michigan and Arizona and so on. In every case, it was, well, the state of Texas doesn't have the proper standing, or this case was filed in the wrong court, or this case should have been filed before the election. You should have pointed these things out. Now it's kind of moot. So these are all procedural bases for essentially a court saying we don't want to hear this. It's a whole different matter than saying we don't find that there is any merit whatsoever to the claims of the fraud itself.
Do you suspect that quite possibly the folks with True the Vote and yourself will be subpoenaed in this case? Are you anticipating that?
Well, I think I'm not anticipating being subpoenaed myself for the simple reason that 2,000 Mules in that sense is a dramatic work that recreates the research done by True the Vote. So they would be, if you use the analogy of a murder case, they would be in the position of, let's say, the ballistics expert or the medical examiner. It's their work that we were featuring and profiling in the film. So in that sense, while I obviously have a decent knowledge of this situation, it is a layman's knowledge. It's not like I did the geo-tracking myself. I was describing the work that was painstakingly done by True the Vote. So they would be the logical people to go to for this kind of thing. But it has been a matter of frustration to me that when you have a movie that has so much smoking gun evidence, and remember, there are two different types of evidence. There's the cell phone evidence, but there's the video evidence. And The point is that they corroborate each other. It's kind of like if you have a murder case and you have a serial killer who went from one house to another, and let's just say you find bodies in 8 different homes, and his cell phone shows you that he was in those homes at those exact times when those murders were committed. Now, one or two of those homes has a surveillance video, and you notice that at home number 3, where he came in at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, you go look at the video at that exact timestamp, and whoops, there he is, walking right through the door. So now you have two utterly independent ways of looking at the same facts, and they support each other. So the evidence is extremely strong because each of the two ways is a very reliable one. One is his phone was there, so he was there, and the second is you can see him.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I want to hold you over for after a short break. I want to talk about your new movie, and I also want to talk about the book, The 2,000 Mules, and we'll take it from there.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
We now return to The Real Story. Here's your host, Jeanne Ives.
Welcome back to The Real Story. Dinesh D'Souza is on the phone with me. If you don't know, he was born in India, came to the United States as an exchange student at the age of 18, and he graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Dartmouth College. An Ivy Leaguer, I guess. He's been called one of the top young public policymakers in the country, and he's been a major force in public policy with books, speeches, films, podcasts, you name it, he does it, and it's all serious business. There's no sophistry here. There's nothing simple about anything that he puts together. It's really well thought out. It's absolutely amazing how important you've become, I think, to the American conversation. And I just want to appreciate you for that. And also, I'm going to play your teaser right here for Police State. Take a listen to his latest film.
Chief Division Counsel and DOJ have approved a no-knock breach. We want the subject to be on display, doing the walk of shame, full visual impact. Any questions?
Are we becoming a police state?
Government told American citizens they couldn't go to church on Sunday.
For the first time in my life, I'm saying to myself, am I going to get a knock at the door?
FBI warrant, come to the door now!
The Patriot Act and FISA were used against Donald Trump.
These individuals have commissioned the biggest propaganda play in U.S. history.
They don't go after the people that rigged the election. They go after the people that want to find out what the hell happened.
We don't need to have a crime. What we need is a person to look at. And then we go find out what crime you did.
FBI!
Our focus is shifting. Our main priority as a bureau is going to be domestic terrorism.
It really paints anybody who's right of center.
If you're a pro-life, pro-family Catholic, they define you as radical.
These are anti-government.
We have freedom of religion and freedom of speech.
Violent extremists, and they must be dealt with. We can do anything we want.
And what you don't hear at the end of that is just a line that comes up that says, "Are you next?" It is chilling out there. Dinesh, can you tell us, I mean, this is a great topic. I mean, obviously you only take on important work. Tell us about this latest film that you're putting out in October.
Well, I think that we've seen emerging in the United States, and it has various sources. It started a little bit with COVID. It continued after January 6th. Surveillance, you see the emergence of mass regimes of censorship, a real kind of octopus of censorship involving private and public institutions, nonprofits, academia, digital platforms, various agencies of the government. You see political prosecutions. I mean, when other countries arrest the leader of the opposition party, the United States over the past 30 years always screams authoritarianism, police state, this is not a real democracy, and so on. And yet, all those things are happening here. So suddenly, the America that I came to as a teenager, in which we were the free world, and then China, North Korea, Soviet Russia were the unfree world, suddenly all those distinctions have become blurred. And so no one has actually told this story, and told the story in a way that brings it home to the average American, because there are going to be people who say, well, I'm not Trump. I didn't go in the Capitol on January 6th, so as long as I, pay my taxes and no one's going to come, I'm not going to hear helicopters above my house. And that's not even true. So what happens in the police state is it starts with the people like Trump, and once the opposition is neutralized, then it expands to cover pretty much everybody, and that's happening even now. So the movie is full of insider testimonies and firsthand accounts. And I think the beauty of the film as a medium is that you don't just say these things, you show them. And so people get the full intellectual as well as the emotional power of it. So I'm really excited about the new film. I think it's going to be as big, if not bigger than 2,000 Mules, and then the topic also could not be more timely.
Absolutely. So, I mean, how did you get it to be so timely? At what point? What was the tipping incident that said, I'm going to do a movie about this now?
Well, I do it in the opposite way of a typical politician. I mean, a lot of times if a politician is running for office, he'll hire a polling company to go ask people, what are the top 7 issues that you care about? And then we'll craft a message. Whereas my approach is the opposite. It's kind of the supply side approach. I'll sit and think to myself, like what really, what is, if I feel a certain sense of anxiety about America, which I do more so than in any of the 35 or so years that I've been in this country, all my adult life, I go, what is the source of that? Is it because our politics is divisive? No. Is it because we've got people who are running for office who are unfit for office? No, that's not the core of it. The core of it is that there's a whole bunch of basic liberties that I took for granted, and I think most Americans have taken for granted for a long time, that were not even up for political adjudication. I mean, your right to free speech doesn't depend on whether 51% of the people disagree with you. Even if 99% of people disagree with you, they should not be able to shut you down or suppress your right of conscience or prevent you from voting or free assembly. So suddenly all these basic rights, equal rights under the law, are evaporating before our eyes, and it's almost as if a lot of people are in a fog about it, or they're like the little wildebeest on the Nature Channel where they're kind of hoping the line doesn't really come for them. So I'm like, look, it's time to alert the herd that something is really wrong here, because once police states get established, lots of people get locked up, lots of people die, and it's really hard to undo them. So we don't want that to happen in the United States of America, and that's why I made this film.
Okay, that's great, because, listen, we are in a police state, and honestly, in the state of Illinois, what's happening in the legislature is they are passing laws that are blatantly unconstitutional, blatantly, but they're just basically telling you, go ahead and sue to get your rights back. That's exactly what's going on, bill after bill, guns, free speech again, you name it, private property rights, all of that is being just washed over by the legislature, signed into law by J.B. Pritzker, and then they're forcing you to sue to get your rights back. So that's one thing that's going on. Number two, we do have an overly surveillance state right now. I just found out that there's a system called Flock. It's got all of the license plate readers on it. And there are actual counties in this state that are reading your vehicle information all that time and putting it through a system that understands whether or not your registration is still valid because you did or did not pay your insurance on time. So without any knowledge at all about whether or not you have just a different insurance company or something like that, they're just going to send you a ticket. I mean, this is also a form of the police state, and it's here right now.
It's here right now, and right on the horizon are all these technologies that allow you to multiply it, tenfold. Facial recognition, artificial intelligence, the so-called social credit system, central bank digital currencies, where if somehow your earnings were digital, then your earnings would not be a piece of paper that says, $100 on it. It would just be an entry into an account, but the government would have a sort of access to an oversight over those accounts. So we're moving into a world that in which technology offers a lot of promise, but very bad people can exploit this stuff, and I think very bad people are doing it, as you say, right now. And so I think this film is going to blow the lid off of all this, because all my films, I mean, this no different than 2,000 Mules, done in a very sober way, and yet extremely in the impact.
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, I wish I had more time with you. I really don't. I just want to, again, tell everybody, go to DineshD'Souza.com. Check out his website. There's a wealth of information. And then check out Illinois Freedom Caucus. They are having Dinesh in person September 29th. That's down in Effingham. And you can meet Dinesh yourself. And you know, this is just a small sliver of what he'll probably talk about that night. I appreciate you so much, Dinesh. Thank you so much for coming on The Real Story with Jeanne Ives.
It's been my pleasure.